Hi, it's Mr. Baumgarten here with a deep dive into how the indentation inside Python determines what code is going to be executed and when. So you can see here I have an if statement with an input prompt for the user to type a number, and then I'm saying if the number typed in was less than 0, else if the number was greater than 0, else, and then finishing else statement, and then we print off by saying have a nice day. So what exactly is going on here? Let's suppose I enter in a negative number, -3, for the sake of argument. So I've typed in -3, the number -3 is now inside my variable a. Python then comes down into this if statement and says, is a, as in the value -3, is that less than 0? Well, yes it is. So whenever Python sees a colon, it knows to expect that the next line of code has been indented or shifted to the right. And sure enough, we have here these 3 lines that have been shifted to the right. And all of the code that has been shifted in by that same amount will be treated as connected to this if statement condition. And so if this condition is true, Python will execute whatever code has been shifted to the right after that if statement. So it'll print the words is negative, it'll print the number is -3, and it will print the words that is all. After that, it will then jump over everything else until it finds something that is aligned with the original if statement. But is no longer part of the if statement, so it will skip over the elif and the else. Under the second scenario, if we typed in a positive number, so let's type in the number 10. So the number 10 is now going to be stored in our variable a. Python will still encounter this if statement here. Is 10 less than 0? No, it is not. So again, because it knows that the indented code is attached to this condition, it will skip over it, and it will look to see what is next and discover that you have an elif statement. So now it will say, is 10 greater than 0? Yes, it is. And so then it will look for the code that has been indented to the right, and will execute all of those lines of code accordingly. Finally, it'll jump out, skip over everything else until it finds something that is horizontally aligned with the original if statement. In the final scenario, if we were to type the number 0, so the variable a has the number 0 in it, 0 is not less than 0, so Python will skip over whatever code was indented after that condition. 0 is not greater than 0, so again Python will skip over the code that has been indented here, and then we'll encounter this else statement. And because none of the previous conditions were true, it will execute whatever the else condition is. So the else statement is kind of like your fallback case scenario. If none of the other things happen to work out, then this is what we're asking Python to run. So it'll print and say is 0 for us, and then come out of the if statement and print have a nice day. Let's look at an alternative scenario here. We have here a while loop, and this while loop will continue running while a is less than 0. So let's put in the number -3. -3 is in our variable a. Python will ask, is a less than 0? Yes, it is. So just like an if statement, it will now look for the indented code that has been shifted to the right, and it will run all of that code for us. So it'll print the words is negative, it'll print the number is -3, it'll print the words adding 1, and then it will increase the value of the variable a by 1. After this, Python will come back up to the while statement and ask, is a still less than 0? So a is now the number -2, and -2 is less than 0. So it'll come back and look for the shifted code indented to the right and run that as a block. Right, when a is -1, it'll come back up to the while statement and check and run the indented code again. And it'll keep doing this, right? Even when a is now 0, it'll still come back up and ask, is 0 less than 0? Right? Because Python doesn't know that this condition isn't no longer valid until it actually checks for it. So it comes back up to the top one last time and asks the question, is 0 less than 0? No, it is not. And so in this scenario, Python will then skip over all the indented code and look for something else that is horizontally aligned with the original while statement, and then carry on with the rest of your code. One more example. Let's do a slightly more complicated one, because this time we have an if statement inside of our for loop. So we have a number counting program here. So if we were to, say, put in the number 10, then this for loop is going to count the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So n is going to start off as the number 0, and Python is going to jump in here and look for all the indented code, because we finished with a colon after our for statement. And whenever we finish a line with a colon, Python knows that the next line of code must be shifted to the right. So all of this code that is shifted in belongs to the for loop, and it will just run as if it was its own almost separate little block of Python code. Well, it is, basically. So the number 0 would print, and then it would carry on and ask, is this if statement true? So 0 modulus 2 is equal to 0. And so just before, like before with the if statement, because we had a colon here, Python will now look to see what code has been further shifted to the right and run that as belonging to that if statement. Once it has finished the if statement, it will then carry on processing the rest of the for loop block of code as normal. All right, and it will then continue looping through, incrementing the number inside n until it has finished, and at which point it will look for the code that is horizontally aligned with the original for statement, and then carry on with your Python program. Alright, I hope this has been a little bit helpful. This has been Mr. Borkengarten signing out.